Hi, my name is Joe and I'm walking through Nishinari today here in Japan. It's one of the poorest areas, not just in Osaka, not even in Kansai, in Japan as a whole. It's a place where you really get to see the raw reality of life in Osaka. It's got quite a reputation. And Osaka as a city already has a more gritty feel compared to other places like Tokyo. And Nishinari might be one of the reasons why it gets that reputation. It's where you see this grittiness in its extreme. It's definitely not the picture-perfect version of Japan that most people expect. In fact, it's got strong ties with the yakuza historically too. So if you want to see what's really going on in this part of Osaka, just keep watching. And when I was filming, I didn't have a set plan necessarily, which is pretty funny considering where I ended up purely by chance. But here's a rough map of the route I ended up taking. I start near Shin-Imamiya, heading towards Doubutsuenmae, then I wander through Tobita Shinchi, lol, head towards Tengachaya and finish up around Hanazonominami. As you can see, that covers a solid chunk of Nishinari-ku, and ku means ward in Japanese, by the way, so it's a way of splitting up the different areas in a city. Now, for some context, Chuo-ku is right to the north of here, and that's home to Namba and Shinsaibashi, the tourist hotspots and what many would consider the centre of Osaka. And that makes sense because Chuo literally means central, so that's where most tourists spend their time. And I've been staying in Naniwa-ku, which is sandwiched between Chuo and Nishinari, so there you do get a mix of the glitz and the glamour of Namba with a touch of the roughness, but once you cross over that line into Nishinari, it is like something changes, the atmosphere just hits you differently. So as we move through the shopping streets, you'll notice karaoke bars, izakayas, and generally people living a bit more on the edge. You probably see some drunk people and maybe some homeless people too. There's high unemployment in this area and life isn't necessarily easy. So it's a side of Japan that most tourists never see, but I wanted to show it and I wanted to see it for myself. Now, some YouTube videos say it's the most dangerous area in Japan. I mean, it might be up there, but the most dangerous area in Japan is still safer than most places in the UK or US, for example. So it's not a very useful label. Poor and dirty, yeah, dangerous, kind of. And I hear Nishinari used to be a lot worse than it is now as well. Apparently some people say it's getting gentrified these days. But here we are, walking towards Doubutsuenmae, and as you can see on the right, there are shops and lockers that will take care of your luggage for you, which should point out that this is also a tourist area. So it's an interesting mix of people. You've got obviously native Japanese people, and you've got foreigners living here, but you've also got tourists staying here because it's so cheap. We'll walk past some hotels and hostels that are pretty run down, to be honest, but they're cheap options. So it's a real interesting mix of people around here. A lot of people working as well, a lot of day labourers and construction workers. Obviously the train tracks on the left there, the JR tracks, and you can see here we're coming up to a hotel with the big orange sign. And yeah, just this kind of thing on the right is not the kind of thing you normally see in Japan, you know, just gravel and rust. And Japan really prides itself on things looking neat and tidy for the most part. So it's a little bit of a culture shock when you come to a place like Nishinari. Saying that, it reminds me of places that I would see in the UK. So I find it interesting being around here. And yeah, so Doubutsuenmae, this is the metro station coming up now on the left. Dobutsuen means zoo, literally. And there's a zoo here called Tennoji Zoo, and this is the train station. Doubutsuenmae means literally in front of the zoo. So a very descriptive name for the train station there. And then on the right here, we're just coming up to a shotengai, a shopping street. So that sign up top just says Doubutsuenmae Ichiban Gai, so the number one street in Doubutsuenmae. And can you see this banner that we're just coming up to here? That's actually advertising the World Expo that's coming to Osaka in a couple of months, in April I think. I've seen a lot of marketing and promotion for it. Whether the local people around here are actually that bothered, I'm not so sure, but it's still quite a cool thing for Osaka to be hosting the World Expo this year. But yeah, here we are in a Shotengai. I mean, we'll see a lot of closed shutters. Now, that's probably for two reasons. One, the shop might have actually closed down, but two, you'll see most of these establishments here are izakayas or karaoke places. I've never seen a Shotengai with that many kind of entertainment or drinking establishments. It's normally food shops or clothes shops, but here, because we're in Nishinari, I think a lot of people just come here to drink. It's just that kind of area, as you'll see, especially when we get further into it. And I'm walking through here, so we do have some food there. But I'm walking through here about 1 p.m, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, so it's the middle of the day, obviously. And there are people. In fact, I'll let the sound, the ambient noise, just play at some point. That sign says gekiyasu, which means dirt cheap, the kind of thing you'll see a lot around here. That's a barber shop. But yeah, I'll just let the sounds play at some point, because you'll be able to hear people singing at this time in the afternoon. This looked really cool. I mean, it's just a completely dilapidated vending machine for alcohol. So you can get your sake there and your beer. Yeah, just some of the shops in Japan, I don't know how they're still in existence. I mean, look at that shop, it just seems so bare. And like, why would anyone go in there in this day and age? I really do get the impression in Japan at the moment that, well, we know there's a huge population problem. I just feel like so many people are just running businesses because it's what they have done for decades, and they're old now, and even though no one's coming in, they're just doing it because that's all there is to do. A little takoyaki stand here, the food of Osaka. You would not believe how much takoyaki the people in Osaka eat. So we're just briefly outside here, and then we'll duck back into the Shotengai. They just go on forever and ever. That just really doesn't look appetizing, does it? Just dust covered samples in the window there. And yeah, it's just pretty dirty and dingy on the whole. As I said, I imagine a lot of these karaoke places will open when it gets a bit later in the day. That's when they'll get most of their custom, but even at this time in the day, there are still people who want to come out for a drink, want to have a sing-along. Got some kind of food stall on the left there. Can you see this yellow sign coming up on the left? It says, if you want to become a man, don't do host or shady part-time jobs. Someone's obviously not happy with the type of work that goes on around here. But anyway, I came across a Tamade supermarket, as you can see here. In fact, if you've seen one of my previous videos, which was on the Tamade supermarket chain, then you've already been to Nishinari here with me. Tamade is basically emblematic of Nishinari. You'll find loads of them around here because they're cheap discount supermarkets. They're kind of dirty, and as you saw there, just really brash, bold lighting basically, and a really colourful vibe. They're really cool, I like them. But it actually comes from a region called Tamade, which is in Nishinari. So it's very kind of symbolic of Nishinari, the Tamade supermarket. And yeah, I'm just kind of carrying on down here. As I said, it just seems to go on, and I thought, why don't we just take a left here? There was no reason for it. I just thought, let's try something different. Pretty much it's just more of the same. All these karaoke bars, and yeah, it's just, I mean, I've got loads of this video, but I think we've kind of really got a good vibe of what's going on. So I'm gonna skip ahead a bit, and then I've got a really interesting story to tell you. So as you can see, I'm just walking, and then eventually I get to this another street which branches off onto the right. And for some reason, I just felt like I wanted to walk down it. I guess it was because it was, well, you can see it here, it's quite open and there was like a gate. And it actually says on the gate, it says Tobita Shinchi, which I didn't know what that was. But I soon found out, because I'm not going to show you, this is me picking up after I've walked through that section. That is basically the karaoke where you can go and get some very romantic and companionship type services. Tobita Shinchi, yeah, it's a very notorious district, it turns out. And I literally just stumbled into it by absolute chance. I honestly did not plan to go there. I'd never even heard the phrase Tobita Shinchi. I know it now because I looked it up. In fact, we can look it up if you want. We can look at, there are even Google reviews of that area that you can get. But it was one of the most kind of bizarre experiences I've had in a very long time in Japan. I've lived here for a few years, and there's really not much that I haven't seen or that shocks me. But I was walking through there, as I say, I didn't know what it was, but there were girls, and they were sat on the floor in like the welcome area of all these houses, and all the houses had signs on, and they were all done up in their makeup and wearing kimonos, very traditional Japanese style, and they were all lit up really brightly with a kind of like selfie light or something like that, just a very bright light in their face, so you could see them very, very clearly, and they were only a few meters away from you. And I was like, what's going on here? And it really took me a while to twig on to what this was. Because of the light, I thought they were all streaming. I thought they were all like streaming on TikTok or Instagram or something. I was like, what have I walked into here? And then it twigged, and I realised exactly what is happening in that area. It was funny because a lot of them were waving at me, and I was like, should I wave back? But yeah, definitely not something I wanted to partake in, especially not at that time of the day. But you know where it is now, and you can go and walk through it if you want. What blew my mind, and why it did take me so long to twig on, was that, as you can see, we were just in a shopping street, and then straight after, we were in an area where it's literally just housing, and I even saw kids riding around on their bikes. It's just plonked right in the middle of this area. It's kind of crazy, kind of blew my mind. But if we come to the listing on Google for this little area, it's called a business park. That's certainly one way to describe it. It's got all the information you might want to look at. There are even reviews. There are probably videos and photos here in this little section on Google, but yeah, you can kind of see what people have thought. Never thought I'd be reading these kind of reviews on Google. Some have given it 1 star, some have given it 5, so obviously a real range of experiences. But it's not a secret, but perhaps not the kind of place I want to film anything. So yeah, back to reality here. I'm now in the Tengachaya area, and as you can see, we've got kind of more normal shops now. We've got an optician's there on the left, lots of just little food stalls, supermarkets, butchers, things like that. Probably more izakayas, and yeah, there's a big pachinko parlor coming up on the right when I turn this corner. That's a Tachinomiya, I think, like that sheet on the outside is to keep all the heat in, but people go in and kind of stand and eat and drink often after work in those types of places. But yeah, coming up to the pachinko parlor here, if you don't know what that is, it's like gambling, kind of like slots. It's like a chance based game. I've never actually done it, but when those doors open, it's a very loud sound, the clattering of pinballs from the machines. And then some more shops, big supermarket on the left, and I like this area. It was all pretty cramped, but perhaps not as dirty as Doubutsuenmae. A bit more the type of place you can just go and actually do some shopping. So yeah, I did see quite a few foreigners around this area. I mean, there were a lot when I stayed in Naniwa as well. But there are a lot in Nishinari because, you know, foreign people, especially if they're immigrants living there, they tend to want to stay in the cheaper areas. Got some kind of Japanese kind of sweets, wakashi stand there. But yeah, lots of foreigners in Nishinari and Naniwaku, kind of more than any other place I've probably lived in Japan. Or maybe it's just a sign of the times. I think there might be more foreigners in Japan in general these days, which is kind of vital really for Japan because of its aging population. It really does need an influx of foreigners to keep things going. There are so many old people and so few young people that yeah, there are real questions about, you know, how Japan is going to function as a society over the coming decades. Things aren't looking great on the whole. Got some woman here who obviously works for that business there, picking up all the rubbish. And as you can see on the left there was a store called Hokka Hokka Bento, which is funny because there's a very famous chain called Hokka Hokka Ben, and that seems like they've completely ripped off the brand name and even the colours. I don't know, maybe there'll be a cease and desist in the post. But yeah, just coming up this kind of main road now, heading from Tengachaya into Hanazonominami, and yeah, loads of different businesses, izakayas, barbers, takoyaki stalls, vending machines of course. And on my right I spotted a family mart that I'm just coming up to, and then also right next to it I spotted a temple. That's just one of the things I love about Japan, you know, just right in the middle of this kind of place you'll just get a really beautiful Buddhist temple that's probably been there for hundreds of years. So yeah, that's kind of concluding my tour of Nishinari today. Hopefully you enjoyed it and learnt something and saw a different side to Japan. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up and maybe subscribe to the channel. I've got loads more content coming from my trips in Japan and even when I go further afield. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.